Christ for the world we sing. The world to Christ we bring. With fervent prayer, the wayward and the lost, by restless passions tossed, redeemed at countless cost from dark despair.
Hello, my name is Clint. Welcome to our study on Acts. Today we'll be in Acts chapter 23. Several times I've referenced the story from Luke chapter 24, and I thought I would go ahead and read that this morning to help explain the details of the story, which I've only touched on briefly. So if you'll bear with me now, I'll read from Luke chapter 24, starting in verse 13, and I will be reading out of the New King James Version. Now behold, two of them were traveling that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they talked together of all the things which had happened. So it was, while they conversed and reasoned, that Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were restrained, so that they did not know him. And he said to them, What kind of conversation is this that you have with one another as you walk and are sad? Then the one whose name was Cleopas answered and said to him, Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem, and have you not known the things which happened there in these days? And he said to them, What things? So they said to him, The things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, today is the 3rd day since these things happened. Yes, and certain women of our company who arrived at the tomb early astonished us when they did not find his body. They came saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. And certain of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see. Verse 25. Then he said to them, O foolish ones, and slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not the Christ to have suffered these things to enter into his glory? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. Then they drew near to the village where they were going, and he indicated that he would have gone farther. But they constrained him, saying, Abide with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is far spent. And he went in to stay with them. Now it came to pass, as he sat at the table with them, and he took bread and blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they knew him, and he vanished from their sight. And they said to one another, Did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us on the road, while he opened the scriptures to us? So we have this recording of the story of these men on the road to Emmaus, the feeling in their hearts when Christ was with them, where they realized they were being fed and their hearts were on fire because of the excitement of being in the very presence of Jesus the Christ. Their reaction is one that I believe that I've felt in my heart from time to time. It's not always there, but I hope to kindle it in the studies that I engage in with people, and I do find that when we have looked at the Word, when we analyze the things that we find in the Word, when we search the Scriptures to find those things and to understand them better and apply them to our lives, that there is a fire in our hearts. There's a fire in my heart that is not there at other times when I'm trying to live my life without the diligent concern for what God would have me to do. So as we enter into this study of Acts, I hope that you will endeavor to stay in the Word, to focus on what it says, to meditate on it when you aren't reading it, to think about what God has commanded, what God is telling us in each of the stories that we find along the way, and how those things apply to our lives. The people in those stories are long dead. The things that have happened are in the book for a reason, but they apply to our lives individually in various ways that are not in the book. And it's up to us to find out how that works in our own lives. And I hope that you will join me as we enter into this study now, and that you will find blessings from God in the Word that He has left for us. Acts chapter 23 from the NIV. Paul looked straight at the Sanhedrin and said, "My brothers, I have fulfilled my duty to God in all good conscience to this day." At this the high priest Ananias ordered those standing near Paul to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, "God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. You sit there to judge me according to the law, yet you yourself violate the law by commanding that I be struck." Verse 4, those who were standing near Paul said, "How dare you insult God's high priest?" Paul replied, "Brothers, I did not realize that he was the high priest, for it is written, 'Do not speak evil about the ruler of your people.'" Verse 6, then Paul, knowing that some of them were Sadducees and the others Pharisees, called out in the Sanhedrin, "My brothers, I am a Pharisee, descended from Pharisees. I stand on trial because of the hope of the resurrection of the dead." When he said this, a dispute broke out between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. Verse 8, the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, and that there are neither angels nor spirits, but the Pharisees believe all these things. Verse 9, there was a great uproar, and some of the teachers of the law who were Pharisees stood up and argued vigorously. "We find nothing wrong with this man," they said. "What if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him?" The dispute became so violent that the commander was afraid Paul would be torn to pieces by them. He ordered the troops to go down and to take him away from them by force and bring him into the barracks. The following night the Lord stood near Paul and said, "Take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome." Verse 12. The next morning some Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. More than 40 men were involved in this plot. They went to the chief priests and the elders and said, "We have taken a solemn oath not to eat anything until we have killed Paul. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petition the commander to bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about his case. We are ready to kill him before he gets here." But when the son of Paul's sister heard of this plot, he went into the barracks and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions and said, "Take this young man to the commander. He has something to tell him." So he took him to the commander. The centurion said, "Paul, the prisoner, sent for me and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you." Verse 19, the commander took the young man by the hand, drew him aside and asked, "What is it you want to tell me?" He said, "Some Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul before the Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about him. Don't give in to them, because more than 40 of them are waiting in ambush for him. They have taken an oath not to eat or drink until they have killed him. They are ready now, waiting for your consent to their request." The commander dismissed the young man with this warning, "Don't tell anyone that you have reported this to me." Verse 23. Then he called 2 of his centurions and ordered them, "Get ready a detachment of 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen, to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight. Provide horses for Paul so that he may be taken safely to Governor Felix." He wrote a letter as follows: Claudius Lysias, to His Excellency Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews, and they were about to kill him, but I came with my troops and rescued him, for I had learned that he is a Roman citizen. I wanted to know why they were accusing him, so I brought him to their Sanhedrin. I found that the accusation had to do with questions about their law, but there was no charge against him that deserved death or imprisonment. Verse 30. When I was informed of a plot to be carried out against the man, I sent him to you at once. I also ordered his accusers to present to you their case against him. Verse 31. So the soldiers, carrying out their orders, took Paul with them during the night and brought him as far as Antipatris. The next day they let the cavalry go on with him while they returned to their barracks. When the cavalry arrived in Caesarea, they delivered the letter to the governor and handed Paul over to him. The governor read the letter and asked what province he was from. Learning that he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will hear your case when your accusers get here." Then he ordered that Paul be kept under guard in Herod's palace. Okay, so continuing our study, a few weeks ago we started this particular segment when Paul arrived in Jerusalem and was trying to reconcile himself to the new Jewish converts to Christianity there. He had made an agreement with the leaders of the church in Jerusalem to try to go through the purification rites and present himself in the temple according to the law, along with three or four other men, to show that he was still Jewish, still obeying the rules of the Jewish tradition, and was not teaching Jewish people to not follow those rules. He did this, and it was a good thing for him to do, because he was one who would always follow the Jewish tradition, so that would not stir up controversy among the Jewish people there against the Gentile Christians. When he was presenting himself in the temple, he was recognized by some people who didn't like him, and basically a riot broke out. The Romans nearby and at their station came down and broke up the riot. The temple doors were closed. They were outside the temple at this point. And the patrol, if you will, the Roman guard, tried to find out what was going on. And in their endeavors to find out, they asked the people there, and the people made various accusations. None were very clear to the Roman guard as to why it would be an issue. And then Paul asked to speak. And as he spoke, he explained his conversion. And when he came to the part when he was supposed to be sent to the Gentiles to preach unto them, that was enough for the Jewish people there to become quite upset, and they broke out into a riot again. And the Roman guard immediately took him into protection, into their shelter there. They questioned him further and found out that he was a Roman citizen, and they were quite concerned because they had begun the process of interrogation, which would have included beating him to some degree. And when they found out he was a citizen, they found out that that was a very bad thing to be engaged in. There's some discussion about his citizenship with the commander there. There were apparently levels, and one of the comments Scott made to me was about those levels. The privilege of Roman citizenship was one hard won. Those who were born with it were considered higher level Roman citizens than those who found other ways to attain citizenship. So if you were born into a Roman family, you were high up on the ladder of Roman citizens. If you were one who had to pay your way or won your citizenship through military service, as apparently the commander of this group paid his way for access to Roman citizenship, you were even higher regarded among Roman citizens, which was the case here. And we didn't really jump into a lot of discussion. There was no discussion. It takes people to have discussions, but the one thing that I hope to get into was the nature of Paul's use of his political privilege and serving this expanse of the word into locations that would not have otherwise reached. He used his privilege quite adeptly, and it is one thing that certainly as American citizens we have privileges that are wasted in a large part because everyone around us has similar privileges. But in other parts of the world, that privilege can take you pretty far as getting into doors, talking to people who would not otherwise have listened to you. So it is one thing that is still a great advantage to people, and finding out how to use your privilege in life to serve God is certainly something we should be seeking to do on a daily basis. But anyway, going on into the next chapter, toward the end of chapter 22, the commander was ready to let him go, but they decided to keep him and have him talk, and that's when we go on into chapter 23. So the commander had assembled the Sanhedrin, and he was going to have Paul make a statement to them. But even before they get started, there's some contention here. So right off the bat, he claims to have lived in good conscience before God unto this day. And if we go back and look at the story as it's unfolded in Acts and in regards to Paul, we know that Paul at every point did what he thought was best. Even when he was persecuting the church, he sought to do that because that's what he thought was the proper way to serve God. He never sought to do things for his own benefit or for some other means, other mechanism, other benefit in his life. There was no need for gold. He wasn't trying to steal anything from anyone. He simply thought that serving God meant that he had to chase down these people who were blaspheming God by claiming to be part of the way. So, when he found out to the contrary, through his experience on the road to Damascus, it changed him, and he sought then to do what he knew to be the right thing, and he lived a much different life going forward. So this is an absolutely true statement, but to the people that he was saying this to, who looked at him as a blasphemer, it would not have been a correct thing to say. So the high priest who was standing there orders that he be struck. And Paul's reaction is quick, and I think it's interesting how he phrased it. You whitewashed wall. We have a phrase, a painted sepulcher, that's, I believe, a similar mindset to what he's saying here. Someone who has presented himself to be holy in the eyes of God, who is in fact not the person that he should be. And so he says, for you sit in judgment according to the law, and do command me to strike contrary to the law. So that was not correct. He did not know this man was the high priest, and someone informed him to that degree. And then he responds immediately about what he just said. I did not know that you were the high priest, because it's written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. It's an important lesson for us to learn today. Politically, we become very agitated from time to time for one reason or another. Whatever your party affiliation is, whatever your personal beliefs politically are, we do have leaders, and we should, as Christians, never speak evil of our leaders. You know, we try to justify that in various ways if you're of one persuasion or another politically. But the truth is, we should always submit to the authority that it presents itself. As long as they're not asking us to do anything that's ungodly, we have no reason not to cooperate with any authority that presents itself. Which is what he seemed to be trying to do here. But it goes on. Paul perceives that, of course, the group is made up of Sadducees, Pharisees, and other groups. These were almost like political groups within the Sanhedrin, and they worked at odds most of the time because of their personal beliefs. But on the council, they had similar authority, not unlike what we might find in one of our political organizations, state houses, or our Congress. So there was political manipulation, political intrigue, always going on, and he took advantage of that, and it was a wise thing to do. It put a whole significant part of that group at ease with Paul immediately by claiming that he was being persecuted because of his belief in the resurrection, and suddenly he had half that group defending him that had probably not intended to do any such thing, and the Sadducees were set against him. So he claims, according to his history of being a Pharisee, and the child of a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee family. And he goes on, and it says that there was a dissension immediately among the group, the Sadducee. It describes the standing. The Sadducees did not believe in an afterlife. They were basically all but agnostic or atheistic. They believed and followed after Jewish tradition strictly for the tradition's sake. Their belief in God was more of a convenience for political gain than it was for any true belief in God. The Pharisees, on the other hand, tended to be those that believed in an afterlife, that believed in God's actual existence, his standing in a heavenly realm with authority over angels. So they ultimately cried out that they found no evil in this man, and they had no place to make any statement, and which of course caused the group to break out into arguments. And again, apparently it was a fairly violent situation, as the commander decided to remove Paul from that situation and took him back into the barracks. And it says the following night the Lord appeared to Paul and told him that he would, as he has testified in Jerusalem, bear witness at Rome. So Paul has experienced, at least at this point, a revelation from God, directly from the Lord, as to what his fate would be. He would go on into Rome. We saw that earlier, that there was at least some general recognition that he would not be a free man going forward, that even before that he felt like his destiny was to take the word to points to the west, to Rome, and even further. And so this is the beginning of that. And it goes on to explain that a few of the Jewish people decided that this was a serious enough threat that they were going to take an oath to take care of this situation. Now, if you've studied the old law, you know that there were not supposed to be taken lightly, the vows of an oath. So they made this oath not to either eat or drink until they killed Paul. So it's interesting. We don't know what became of him. They didn't manage to kill Paul, so we don't know exactly how they met their vow, having not met their vow. So it would have been very bad time for them. But anyway, that's not the story. The story is that this conspiracy was made. It was known to Paul's nephew, and who brought it to Paul's attention, and then Paul directed that information to the commander. And there's a whole story about how that gets there. It's told in some detail, but I'm passing over that detail for the moment because it seems rather simple. But the commander ultimately takes the boy aside privately and finds out the plan, and immediately makes a counter plan that involves sending Paul on to the area regional governor. And he prepares a group of men to take him on, and prepares this letter. Now it's very interesting to me anyway, the manner in which he prepared the group. He very specifically organized the group in a particular way, and sent them on their way with a letter. Now the letter is very interesting also, and it's probably where we're going to focus right now. I'll go ahead and start reading it. Greetings. It starts in verse 26. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them. Coming with troops, I rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman, which is not true. We know it's not true at all. He came down because there was a ruckus in the temple, in the midst of the temple, and by the time he got there, they were already outside the temple. He did not know who Paul was or He suspected Paul was a terrorist from Egypt, as a matter of fact. And he broke up the crowd and wanted to find out what the issue was specifically, and was not able to determine immediately what the issue was. He found out that Paul was not an Egyptian terrorist, but beyond that, that's not what happened. It continues. And when I wanted to know the reason they accused him, I brought him before their council. So he leaves out a whole segment there where he would have to have said that we were about to beat him to find out that he was what he was up to, when we found out he was Roman, and that's when we decided to do all the other stuff that we decided to do. But it continues. I found out that he was accused concerning questions of their law, but had nothing charged against him deserving of death or chains, which is certainly true. Even if what they had claimed was true, I'm not sure that it would, under the law, have warranted death. Now, bringing a Gentile into the temple might have, but other than that, I'm not sure that it did, because had it, the church in Jerusalem would already be under severe persecution, and it's not clear that they were. So it was just Paul that was being attacked here. And when it was told me that the Jews lay in wait for the man, I sent him immediately to you and commanded his accusers to state before you the charges against him. So it's a very brief letter. It's not super complicated, but in it we find, while he did outline some general chronology of the situation, he did not exactly convey it in a truthful manner. But he was passing the buck, so it wasn't a super big deal. He sent Paul along, and along the way, a group of the men fell back, and the mounted group continued on to Caesarea and delivered Paul to the governor there. And the governor there found out that Paul was from Cilicia, and determined that he would hear the accusers when they came, and then put Paul in Herod's praetorium, in his palace. It's not clear. The translations are a little bit different there. Was he housed with the Praetorian Guard there, or was he housed in the guest quarters of Herod's palace? It's not super clear. But whatever it was a far cry better than being stoned to death by the Jewish people. So he's on his way, and we'll hear more about the rest of the story in the next chapter. So I hope you found something of value in the reading of the chapter, in our brief covering of the highlights from the chapter 23, and we'll go on into chapter 24 next time. Thank you for bearing with me as we've pursued this study through this video technology. I hope that it's been of some benefit to you and encouragement. And we do hope to continue this. The circumstances have changed. There's a talk of lifting the ban of assembly, and I haven't yet found out what's going to happen. I'm recording this on Wednesday previous, so this is not live. It's live streaming from a recording, but I recorded this on Wednesday. So I don't know the whole story yet. We do have sick in our number. Linda Garrett is one of them. Wayne Scott's not doing well, so do keep these in your prayers, and I hope to see you again soon. God bless.